The desert knows things. It holds memory better than any man, keeps it folded in layers of red rock and wind-carved stone, buried beneath centuries of sand. And when the storms come, it doesn't rage. It remembers. That evening, the sky wore a bruise the color of regret. Low thunder rumbled like distant hooves. The wind was dry at first, sharp, tasting of iron, but by nightfall it would carry rain, and with it, the kind of silence that only follows sorrow. A lone rider moved, slowly across the edge of Apache country. He wasn't much to look at, just a man in a duster faded by time, on a horse that knew the rhythm of solitude. His name was Luke Thatcher, though he hadn't heard it spoken aloud in weeks. There was a slowness to him, not from age, but from weight, the kind that settles in a man's bones after too many nights under bloodied stars. He hadn't come to find anything. He was only trying to outride memory, but the land had other plans. It was the crows who told him. First a sudden scatter of black wings from the canyon edge, spiraling like a dark omen into the amber sky. Luke dismounted quietly, always quietly, a few yards off the trail, tucked behind a tangle of brittle brush and sage. There she was, a woman, half covered in dust, her dark hair matted with blood, one boot missing. Her skin was the rich earth brown of the desert itself, and her body bore the story of survival, torn hide garments, bruises old and new, and the kind of stillness that makes you hold your breath to see if life still lingers. He knelt beside her, like he'd done too many times before, one hand to her throat, a pulse, faint, but there. He did not speak. Words felt too loud for the moment. Instead, he pulled his canteen and dripped water into her cracked lips. She coughed weakly, eyes fluttering open just for a breath of time, dark eyes, deep, but wary eyes that had seen betrayal and refused to close again. And then she went limp. The storm came in fast, like it was chasing something by the time Luke had her wrapped in his bedroll and across his horse's back. Lightning split the horizon. He led the animal toward a ridge he'd passed earlier, a half-collapsed mining cave just wide enough for shelter. There was no fire that night, only the hush of rain on stone, and the woman's labored breath echoing in the small space between them. Luke sat near the entrance, back against the wall, hat pulled low. He didn't sleep. He just watched her, not out of desire or worry, but duty. A man like him had too much quiet inside to ignore someone left behind. At some point near dawn, her voice cracked the silence like flint. "You should have left me." Luke turned. Slow. Her eyes were open now, focused. He shook his head. Not in disagreement, just acknowledgement. "You're Apache," he said, voice rough from disuse. She blinked. "I was, until they took everything." Her words dropped like stones into the dark. He didn't press, just passed her the canteen again, watched her drink. "You got a name?" he asked. Soft, she hesitated. "Niall," she said finally. "It means wind." Luke nodded once, as if the desert itself had named her. By midday, the rain let up. Luke stepped outside, surveying the land. The air smelled clean again, like the storm had washed the sorrow off the stones. He returned with prickly pear and boiled it soft. Fed her in silence. Niall did not thank him, but her eyes lingered on him longer each time. That evening, she tried to sit up and winced. He moved to help, but she waved him off. "I can stand." He stayed still, watching her legs tremble beneath her like a young colt, learning trust again. "You been out here long?" he asked, almost apologetic for speaking. "3 sons," she said. "They ran me down, then left." Luke's jaw tensed. He didn't ask who they were. He'd seen enough to guess. White traders, drunken soldiers, or worse, the kind of men who smelled opportunity in a woman's wounds. But again, he didn't press. Instead, he set to cleaning her wound again. She let him. That night, beneath a moon carved thin as a blade, she whispered, "Why'd you help me?" Luke stared at the stars. Because I buried enough good people. Niall watched him for a long time. You think I'm good? He met her eyes then, really saw her. I think you're still breathing. It wasn't much, but it was honest. And in a world where too many men spoke pretty lies, that honesty felt warmer than any fire. By the third day, she could walk. Luke offered her his horse. She refused. I'll walk with you, she said. He gave a slow nod, so they walked, side by side. Across the open land, two shadows stretched long against the burning dusk. No promises, no plans, just two souls stitched together for a moment by mercy. When they reached the edge of Apache land, she stopped. A crow circled overhead. The wind shifted. Niall placed a hand on his chest, right over the heart. I don't know what this means, she said. Luke looked down at her hand. Me neither. And somehow, that was enough, because sometimes the desert doesn't offer answers, just crossings. And sometimes the souls who meet at those crossings change the course of rivers that have run dry for far too long. The hills rose soft and wide like the backs of sleeping animals, sun-warmed and quiet under the morning haze. A thin silver mist clung to the ground, as if the earth hadn't quite let go of dreaming yet. They walked together, Luke and Niall, through that dreamscape. He walked with the steady grace of a man used to going unnoticed. She, slower still, shoulders squared, though her body ached with every step. The only sound was the wind, low and hollow, humming like an old lullaby between canyon walls. Then, in the distance, a feather of smoke rising into the blue dot. Niall stopped. Her eyes narrowed. Luke followed her gaze, watching the way her face changed, not with fear, but something older, like roots waking in the soil. My people, she said. And with that, she took the lead. The village sat low in the basin of 3 hills, hidden from travelers, forgotten by maps. No fences, just the natural world, holding them like a cupped hand. Children played near the creek. A few old dogs napped beneath sun-bleached hides. A circle of horses stood tethered near a ridge, quiet and watching. When Niall stepped into the clearing, the world seemed to pause, eyes turned. One child gasped. Then, a cry broke through the stillness. A woman stepped forward, older, wrapped in red-dyed cloth, hair streaked silver and black. She did not run. She walked slow, measured, as if each step pulled threads of memory. Taught again. Niall, she said, voice low and reverent. Niall stopped, her breath caught. Her hands trembled. Aunt Redbird, she whispered, and then they were in each other's arms, not gently, but with a force that spoke of years lost and nights spent praying to smoke and sky. Luke stood at the edge, his hat low, a stranger among kin. He did not speak. He only watched, and waited. Later, he sat outside a lodge of bundled reeds while the elders gathered inside with Niall. A boy brought him a small bowl of stew, and watched him eat with wide, suspicious eyes. You're the one who brought her back, the boy said. Luke nodded. The boy stared at him a while longer, then asked, Did you kill the men who hurt her? Luke shook his head slowly. No, why not? Luke set the bowl down, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Sometimes killing ain't justice, he said. Sometimes it's just more dying. The boy looked confused, but he didn't ask again. Inside the lodge, Niall sat cross-legged, beside Redbird, facing Chief Dasha, a man whose silence carried more weight than most words. His face was carved from the land, lined, sun-worn, and still as stone. When she told her story, what had happened, how she'd nearly died, she did not cry. She told it like a warrior would, without dramatics, just truth. He carried me through the storm, she finished. But he never touched me wrong. He never asked for anything. He just stayed. Redbird's eyes, full of soft fire, turned to the others. He carried her spirit back across the threshold. She said, You know what that means. Chief Dasha nodded once. His voice was deep and unhurried. There are traditions, he said, older than any law carved in white man's ink, older than the rifle, older than guilt. He looked toward the flap of the lodge, where Luke sat silent beyond. If he crossed through death to bring her back, he continued, then by spirit law, she belongs to him now. Niall's breath caught. Belongs. Redbird touched her arm gently. It doesn't mean owned, she said. It means woven, like the way two rivers meet and don't unmeet again. Outside, Luke was sharpening a stick to pass the time when a young man stepped from the shadows, arms folded tight, mouth drawn in a bitter line. You think just because you picked her up off the dirt that makes you a hero? The man said. You think you earned a place here? Luke didn't look up. I don't want a place, the man scoffed. Good. We don't want you here either. Luke paused, finally glancing up. His eyes calm and steady, held no anger. You, her kin? No, the man said, a bit too fast. Luke nodded again. Didn't think so. The young man flinched, not because of threat, but because of truth. His name was Tomas, half Apache, half Mexican. Never fully welcomed by either. He had always wanted Niall's attention, but never earned her trust. Now, someone else had, without trying. That evening, the village fire crackled in the center of the circle. Shadows danced across weathered faces as stories were told, and drums spoke in slow, steady rhythm. Luke sat just beyond the glow. As always, watching, listening. Niall joined him without a word, sitting close enough to feel the heat of him, but not touching. She held a bowl of water in her lap, watching her reflection. I never thought I'd see this place again, she said softly. Luke glanced at her. You're strong. She shook her head. No, I was lucky. He paused. No, he said. Lucky don't crawl 3 days through cactus and rattlesnake ground. Lucky don't speak truth with that kind of fire in her voice. She turned, slowly, to face him. There was silence between them. Not awkward, but full of everything that hadn't been said. You didn't have to help me, she said. I know. You could have left me there. I know. Why didn't you? He looked at her now, fully. Because someone did that to my sister, he said. And I never got to help her. And just like that, the silence broke. Not with noise, but understanding. Something passed between them in the space of a breath. Something wordless and deep-rooted. Not romance, not yet. But the early, fragile bloom of trust. Later, by the edge of the hills. Redbird sat with Luke as the wind pulled gently at the firelight. You've seen hard things, she said. He nodded. You carry them quiet. Not much use in shouting, M. She smiled faintly. Niall doesn't trust easy. She's been made a promise too many times, only to be left behind. Luke looked at the stars, voice soft. I won't promise her anything. Redbird raised an eyebrow. No. He turned to her then, eyes firm. I'll just be there. She studied him for a long time, then nodded. That may be the first promise worth keeping. As the fire died to glowing coals and coyotes sang lullabies to the hills, the village settled into dreams. Luke lay beneath the stars, blanket over his chest, staring into the vastness. A voice came from beside him, tired, but clear. You know the old stories say, when a life is given back, it belongs to the one who carried it. Luke didn't answer at first. Then she ain't a thing to belong to no one. No, said the voice. But you're not either. And then, only wind. Some laws are written in dust and vanish with the wind. Others they are older than fire, and held not in books, but in breath. The day began quiet. A thin smoke curled from cooked fires. Birds sang somewhere deep in the cottonwoods, and the world seemed to hum with something just beneath the surface, like a drumbeat no one had struck yet. Luke sat near the horse corral, mending tack with slow fingers. Niall passed nearby, carrying a bundle of herbs, and gave him a glance, the kind of glance that lingers after it's gone. Neither of them spoke, but something had changed. That evening, The drumbeat began. A fire was lit in the center of the village. The people gathered, not in excitement, but with the weight of something sacred. Elders sat close, younger ones in circles behind them. Even the children were quiet. Luke was called forward by Chief Dasha. He hesitated. He did not like being the center of anything, but something in Niall's eyes steadied him. He stepped into the circle. Dasha stood with the grace of an old tree, slow, deliberate, but full of quiet authority. "There is a law," he said, voice deep as canyon wind, "that lives beyond the reach of man. A law of spirit, of balance, of return." He gestured toward Niall, who stepped forward. "This woman," he continued, "was touched by death. Her spirit had left her body, and her feet were already on the path west." He turned to Luke. "You brought her back." Luke said nothing. He didn't know what to say. "You did not claim her. You asked for nothing. But in doing so, you fulfilled a law older than any treaty or border." A murmur passed through the people. Not doubt, not judgment, recognition, in the old ways. Redbird spoke now, her voice soft but sure. "Such a bond cannot be repaid with food, nor horses, nor words." She looked to Niall. When a man pulls someone from the edge of the spirit world, the two souls become tied, intertwined, and by sacred tradition, that woman now belongs to him. Luke flinched. So did Niall belong. The word hung heavy too, full, too sharp. But Redbird stepped forward, palms raised. "This is not a man's claim. This is not a binding of flesh. It is the spirit that recognizes its home." Dasha nodded. "He may refuse. She may walk away. But if they do not, the bond remains." A silence fell like a blanket over the circle. All eyes were on them. Luke turned to Niall. She met his gaze with something unreadable, not fear, not hope, something deeper. Later, as the fire died down, they sat alone beneath the stars. Luke broke the silence. "I didn't ask for this." Niall nodded. "Neither did I." He sighed. "I'm no good with tradition, no good with people, really." "I noticed," she said, and there was a faint smile. He looked down at his hands. "I didn't save you to win anything, I know." They sat in silence again, but this time, it felt softer. Luke glanced at her, voice low. "You believe in that spirit-binding stuff?" Niall didn't answer right away. She picked up a small stone and turned it in her fingers. "When my mother died, I felt her breath leave the hut. Not her body, her breath, like the wind moved through me. I believe in things I can't name." She looked at him now. "I don't know what you are to me, Luke, but when you walk away, the air feels wrong." He held her gaze, and for the first time, Luke let the silence break within him. "I don't know who I am without the guilt I carry." She reached out, touched the back of his hand. "Maybe that's not for you to carry alone anymore. But not all hearts accept peace without protest." That night, Tomas stood with two other young men near the edge of camp, firelight reflecting in bitter eyes. "It's a trick," he spat. She was weak, and he took advantage. One man shifted, uncomfortably. "Redbird trusts him. She's old. She believes stories. I believe actions." His fists clenched. "She should be with one of us, one of her people. And yet," said a quiet voice behind them, "none of you found her. None of you looked." The three turned. Redbird stood at the path's edge, arms crossed. "She nearly died out there. The man who left her. He looked like you. Brave with words, absent when it mattered." Tomas's jaw tightened. "He's still an outsider." Red stepped forward. "And you're still a child." Her eyes were hard, not cruel. When a spirit knows its path, only fools throw rocks at it. At dawn, Luke rode alone into the hills. Not running, just thinking. He didn't know what it meant to belong to something again. He had been a soldier, a healer, a drifter, but never held He stopped at a ridge, where the land dropped into endless golden space, and sat beneath a mesquite tree. The wind tugged at his coat. A hawk circled far overhead. He thought of the first life he couldn't save, a boy with blood, spilling like wine on battlefield grass. He thought of how his hands never stopped shaking until Niall touched them by the fire dot back in the village. A child approached Niall. It was Redbird's grandson, the same one who had stared at Luke with such sharp curiosity. "Are you gonna marry him now?" the boy asked, blunt and honest. Niall laughed, the sound soft and rare. "No," she said. "Not unless the spirits say we should." "Did they say?" "I think they're still deciding." He nodded, then ran off chasing a dog. Niall watched. The hills waiting. Luke returned as the sun dipped, low, casting gold across everything like it had been painted. He dismounted quietly, found Niall near the creek. She looked up, said nothing. He sat beside her, legs crossed. "I don't want to own you," he said. "You don't. I don't want to make promises I can't keep." "You haven't." He paused. "But if there's a place for me, beside you, I'd stay." She turned her head, studied him, the lines in his face, the way his eyes held hers without trembling. "You never asked me to be yours," she said. "I never needed to. And still," she whispered, "my heart feels calmer when you're near." He didn't speak. He simply reached out his hand, palm up between them, not grabbing, not begging, just waiting. She laid hers in it, not like a vow, but like a beginning. The days after were quiet, like the land itself was watching and waiting. Luke remained, but not as a guest. He worked, repaired fences, carried water, sat with elders without interrupting. Children began to inch closer. Dogs no longer barked. When he passed, even the land grew softer around him. Niall walked with him in the early morning, when the mist still kissed the earth, and time felt slow and holy. They did not speak of what they were. They did not rush to name it. Instead, they let it be. But peace, like all things precious, is always tested. It began with dust, a fine red cloud on the horizon, where no herd should have been. 3 riders approached, their coats long and cracked, rifles slung careless over shoulders. Their horses were lean and tired. Their eyes were not. At the head was a man with a scar splitting, his jaw like a cruel smile. Niall froze when she saw him. Her fingers clenched the fabric at her side. Luke, standing beside her, watched the man with a stillness that chilled the air. Around them, "I know that face," she said, voice hollow. The man dismounted, cocky and loose-hipped, like the land owed him welcome. "Evenin', princess," he drawled. "Been a while." She did not answer. Luke stepped slightly forward, not in front of her, but beside her. "Equal." The man looked him up and down. "This your new pet?" Luke didn't blink. His voice was low. "You're not welcome here." Scarjaw laughed. The sound was dry as bone. "I got a paper says otherwise. She's wanted for aiding raiders, and I got the right to bring her in." Redbird stepped out from the shadows of her lodge. "You have nothing here but dust and lies. I got bounty rights. No law exists here but the one that honors spirit and land," she said, voice calm as thunder before the storm. "You left her to die. Now you want to profit from what you abandoned." Scarjaw's face twisted. "She belongs to no one. She's not yours," Luke said, quiet but firm. "Not by blood, not by law, not by soul." Scarjaw's hand brushed the butt of his revolver. So did Luke's. But the elder men stood now, the young ones. Even the children watched from behind woven hides. It wasn't a standoff. It was a wall, not made of weapons, made of witnesses, made of truth. Scarjaw spat into the dirt. "This ain't over." "Yes, it is," Niall said, not loud, but so clear it cut the wind. Her voice wasn't a tremble anymore. It was a drum. He rode away without another word. That night, the fire was lit, not out of fear, but ceremony. A smoke offering was burned, sage and sweetgrass rising toward the stars, curling into prayers only the earth could understand. Niall and Luke sat at the edge. Again, Redbird handed them a bowl of ashes. You both crossed the threshold, she said. It is not marriage. It is not binding, but it is marking. The world must know you are no longer only yourselves. They dipped fingers into the ash, drew 3 lines across each other's forearms, not as brands, as blessings. Luke stared into the flames, quiet. Something had settled inside him, a silence that didn't ache anymore. I've never been part of something that didn't hurt, he said. Nihio laid her head against his shoulder. This isn't something, she said. This is home. And in that moment, he understood. Love wasn't loud. It was consistent. It was showing up again and again, with gentleness, with breath, with silence that held space instead of swallowing it. A few days later, Luke stood at the edge of the ridge, saddlebag in hand. His horse waited patiently beside him. Niall joined him there. You leaving? She asked. He turned, and there was no fear in her voice, just curiosity. Not unless I hear the wind say so, he said. She nodded. The silence between them was warm now. She took the carved horse from her pocket, the one he had given the child, who had passed it to her. She pressed it into his palm. If you go, take this. It carries my breath. He smiled. Then I won't be far. Asterisk out beyond the fences of this world, beyond maps and headlines and hurried hands. There are stories like this one, quiet ones. Stories not of conquest or noise, but of return. A soldier with hands too tired to carry pain, and a woman with a spirit too strong to break. They found each other not through lightning, but through rain. The sacred doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits. Sometimes it rides in with the storm and stays behind when the thunder's gone. And if you listen, really listen, you might hear the breath of something old still whispering across the desert. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are beloved.